Hi, my name's Anne. Welcome to our October painting, which is this beautiful fall walk. I'm going to walk you step by step to this painting. You can see we have our normal brushes that we use. Our set of paints, I will go over the brushes and the color combinations as we get ready to get started. Okay, so again, as usual, we'll be using our 4 brushes, our big brush, our small flat brush, our round brush, and our tiny brush. I like to throw those all in a cup of water so they're just in there waiting for me to go. If you're using foam brushes, again, same brush strokes, same techniques, you'll just have a little bit more paint on your brush, probably depending on the width of the foam. You can see on my plate of paint, sorry, paint went a little crazy again today, I have red, orange, yellow, green, black, white, and blue. And we're pretty much going to use all those colors in our painting today. A lot of yellow, a lot of orange, a lot of red, and obviously blue for the background, little tiny bits of green here and there. If you don't have orange paint, again, that is going to be mixing yellow and red together, more yellow than red, in order to get that nice orange color. But we'll go ahead and cross that bridge when we get there. I'm going to go ahead, pick up my canvas. If you're using a board, same thing. I'm going to take my biggest brush, pat it dry on my paper towel, and I am just going to paint my canvas with a little bit of water. And that is going to help soften up the primer. It's going to help my paint adhere on here a little bit better. And if I'm painting my edges, I'm going to give my edges just a little bit of water as well. I like to have my paintings wrap around the edge so I don't have to worry if it's perfect. So just enough that there's a little bit of a sheen on here. I don't need a river running down it. Just enough of a sheen, it's going to help that. And we're going to get ready to go ahead and start with our blue background. Now, less is more in this painting because we're going to be doing a lot of covering when we get up to all those leaves. So keep the background color light, not super thick. We want coverage of our canvas, but not tons and tons of paint. Otherwise, it's not going to dry in time for you to be doing this part. So I'm going to grab a scoop of white with my big brush and a tiny bit of blue. My color's pretty light, so I don't really need a lot of blue on here. And so I mixed the color. It's pretty light. I didn't mix it all the way because I like my sky to have some variations in the color. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a little bit of a guide here so I get my perspective going on my path. So if I'm looking at my canvas, I've got about 3 to 4 inches up here on the side, and this is a little bit of an angle, and I'm doing this in blue because I'm going to paint up from the edge with blue. So my trees are going to go in here, creating my angles, but this is going to be the foreground, and then this is going to be the sky. So I've got this line, I've got my big brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to pull up using straight vertical strokes. Not quite all the way to the top, but close. If I want that to be a little bit darker down there, I'll just add a little bit more straight blue as I pull up from that center point. And I am going to go all the way across that. I should have done that line for you so you could see that. I'm just for a minute working straight up. Adding a little bit darker, and I'm just flicking my brush as I go up here. Once I get that dark down in there, then I can go ahead and just grab a little bit more of that paint, and then I can use just strokes that look like little X's. Gives me a little bit of a foggy feel, and it's helping me cover in that whole background color as I go up. Sometimes I'll wipe my brush off, maybe just grab a little bit more straight white because my blue gets lighter as I get to the top of my canvas. So again, just those short little strokes kind of look like X's, kind of look like I'm just, in some ways, almost just scrubbing my brush along the edge because it gives me that, a little bit of that misty feel. here. And I'm going to fill that all the way up to the top. If I'm painting my edges, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint the top edge, and I'm going to paint the side edges as I go all the way down to that edge there where the path would come off, meet the edge. Again, working on that, just making sure everything has a little bit of paint on it. I don't want to be able to see any of my canvas through there, but I don't want to, sorry, I had to turn it this way for a second. I don't want it super thick because I do want it to be able to dry. So in this part of the painting, we kind of worked a little bit vertically and up and down. So I've got this nice sky here. As I go, throw that big brush in my cup of water, and I'm going to grab my tiniest brush for a minute, and in the background, tiniest brush, a little bit of black paint, there are just a few trees that are really, really light. So from this blue line with that black brush, I'm just kind of going to pull some very short trees here. Maybe some will look like they have a little bit of a branch. 1, 2, I don't need very many of these. I'm going to do 2 on the left side, and maybe 3 over here on the left. They don't go up very high. We don't see the tops of these trees. These are more in the background, so it's going to help us create our perspective. So you can see just a little bit there. If a branch were to happen to touch the edge, go ahead and pull it off the edge for you. I like to have an uneven amount here as I'm going. These don't have to blend down into, and just a few, they're going to give us an idea that there are trees further back. So now I can go back to my big brush. I've cleaned it off. I've wiped all that excess water off. And for this minute, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab a scoop of yellow and a little bit of white. This is going to give me the basis of my colors down in my foreground. And as I'm doing this, it's also letting all this dry. Now, really important here that when you're working, that you do work horizontally with your brush strokes. You can either use the wide part of the brush, or you can use the skinny edge as you do it. But we need to work on this horizontal plane because that keeps it so it looks like it is actually a path, especially as we get up here and we get a little narrower. That's going to keep that looking. If we were to work vertically, what happens is it ends up looking a little bit like there's a river coming down there. So you can see, even if my blue blends in here a little bit, and I go over the edge of that, those tree branches, that's okay, because that's just helping me give an idea that there's a little bit of green there, maybe there's a little bit of grass along those edges. And again, I'm going to paint this whole bottom part right now with this yellow-white combination. Again, working horizontally, whether I'm using the skinny part or the wide part of the brush, this is just giving me a really good base color to cover this up. And I can add other colors on top of that. Again, if you're painting your edges, go ahead and take this yellow off the side. And you can go ahead and paint the bottom edge as well. So that's giving me a really nice base. And while this yellow is still wet, I'm going to go ahead with the same brush, skinny edge of the brush this time, and I'm going to add in some red. Just a little overlapping. You can see I'm not using hard edge strokes. I'm doing it kind of soft here. Just looking like these could be piles of leaves that are falling on the ground. Because my yellow is wet, it's giving me a nice combination of color, nice fall colors in here. And I'm going to do the same with my orange. Now, if you don't have orange, again, you are going to mix red and yellow together. You can see I can just take some of that orange right in with the red, and while all this color is wet, for our first layer, it's going to just blend together really, really well and give me a nice base of fall leaves that are coming down before I add my trees and everything in. So this time I am working with the skinny edge of this brush, still working horizontally. Still working horizontally there. Every time I feel like I get a little too much paint on my brush, I'm just going to wipe it off on my paper towel, and then I can go ahead and add some more in there. So right now, just a nice thing, where any of my color has touched the edge, I'm going to make sure that it does come off, so I'm continuing my painting there. But I've started my basis of the leaves as I'm going down there. Okay, this painting does move pretty quickly. Now, we've got our trees in the background. Here we've got our sky. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add we have 8 trees here. 2 really pale in the center where the path goes together. So those are going to be pretty close together. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to use my small brush. And for a minute, I'm going to demonstrate on the back so you can see how I'm going to do this. I press down, little brush up, black paint, I press down just a little bit. And as I pull up, I twist off just a little bit so I get an idea of a branch. Now, the 2 that are close together, and only about an inch apart, don't need to have very many branches. Maybe they'll have a little overlap here, but maybe just that. As we get closer and closer, as these come down in a diagonal, these trees, as they come in the foreground, are going to look like they have more branches. So we'll give them more as we go. So for these 2 that are here in the center, and they're kind of right in the center of where my path meets here, I'll go down into the yellow a little bit, and I'm going to pull up about 4 inches, and I'll just wiggle just a little. And if it's not super dark, I'm okay with that, because I'm going to cover so much of this up with all these leaves that it's not really going to matter. So 1 here and 1 maybe an inch apart over here, and just again that little bit of that wiggle. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just tone these down with a little bit of white paint, just following that black line with white. It kind of really tones these down. They look a little more misty than maybe the ones that are going to be more in the foreground. But again, none of my lines here you can see are really solid. They're very light. They're very just giving me the illusion that I have branches further up here in the sky, but I don't need to make it really heavy. So I'll go over here on the left side first. And as my trees get down, they're going to go at an angle. They're going to get a little bigger. So I'm going to press out a little wider. And I'm going to pull up a little higher before my branches start to wiggle out. These don't quite touch the top of the canvas yet. And again, there's no right or wrong number of branches to put on here, since I know that almost all the top of the canvas is going to be covered up. I just have to have the illusion that they're there. So this one has gone down about an inch spaced apart and about a half an inch down. So as I go down here, I'm going to go down about another half an inch, press out some more, and I might switch to, I'm going to switch to my small flat brush to make these 2 other trees on the side, just because they need to be a little bit bigger. And again, as I go up, I just twist my brush a little bit wood to create some branches. These branches will come up to the top. But again, I'm not going to put a lot in there. So 1, 2, 3, this has helped creating my perspective on my path. I'm going to go down, I'm going to leave about 1.5 inches, 2 inches from the bottom of the canvas, closer to the edge. This tree is going to look bigger because I press out. And as I go up, that's when I twist my brush and become a little bit narrower. And again, these branches now go all the way up to the top. I might have one that goes off the edge, maybe 2. They can cross over each other as you go. So you can see this is going to help create this path into the woods. This is kind of the doorway where the path, where you can go further into the woods over the horizon line between these 2 smaller trees. If it's more comfortable for you to do the trunks using the wider brush, you can, and then when you get up a little higher, you can switch to the smaller brush to do the branches. With this painting, do not worry if your branches get too thick, because we're going to cover them up. So now I'll just move over to the other side and go ahead and do the same thing over here. And if they're not perfectly even as you go across, that's okay. It's nature, so nothing is perfectly lined up as we go. So 1, 2, and again, about 1 inch in between, about 1/2 inch down. This tree gets a little wider. Again, these branches do go off the top. So you can see this look here. And you can see I've spaced my trees so I can still see those really light trees that we put in the background in the first one. So there is a little bit of the illusion that there's even trees further back. And again, I'll go here. This one's going to be bigger. Press out and come up. If your tree trunk has a little wobble in it, that's okay as well. Again, this is nature that we're painting. It is not perfect. So your trees don't need to look perfect. You can see one of my branches got a little thick up here, and I'm not even going to worry about it because I know I'm going to tone it down. So I'll just grab a little bit of white on my brush here and go up the insides of each tree just a little. Tone down that straight black just a bit, giving me a little bit of some depth here. I'm not worrying what the bottom of the tree looks like because I know when I start adding the leaves as I put them on the top, it's going to soften up. If you feel that you need to make them have a little bit more of a flare like a tree trunk would with the roots, please feel free to do so, but you do not have to because we are going to cover up a good portion of that. And if I'm doing that, I just come down and I kind of just make like a little bit of an L shape on the bottom of my square there. Round it off a little bit to create those roots at the base of that tree. I'm not going to worry too much about those really light ones I did because I'm going to cover those up. Okay, so now the best part is the top of our background is all dry. We didn't go really heavy on the black paint, so that's going to dry really quick. Now, we're going to use a technique called pouncing. And so for that, I'm going to be using my round brush. We're going to work in 3 to 4 layers of color. Everything that's going to go up, above, some more color is going to go down below. So, if your canvas is on an easel, I recommend either holding the top of your easel as you do this, or actually removing your canvas from the easel and putting it flat on your table. Because it does have a tendency to want to move your easel as you're pouncing. So I'm going to start with just straight red. Round brush. And my brush, when I do this, I'm holding it perpendicular to my canvas and I am just tapping right across. Now you can see the red is up a little bit higher and along the edges. And I can tap straight over that black. If it gets a little dark, that's okay. And this is the base of my darkest color that's going to be in my leaves. If my red touches the edge, I'm going to go ahead and tap some of that color off. I don't keep it all the same thickness or height, and I try to make sure that all in all, it's pretty random. You can add more red than you think you might want because we are going to cover it up. And you can see I'm also covering up my branches. I'm going over them. It's important to remember that leaves don't grow up one side of a branch and down the other. We're creating this really full looking fall tree, so we want to make sure that we have a lot of branches in here. I'm going to add a couple more little branches kind of here. The best part about this is you don't necessarily even have to have branches on. Sometimes you can just create the illusion that they are there with the tapping. I'm even going to tap over the trunks of some of my branches because that helps create dimension as well. A little bit less here in the center. There we go. And I think I'll put a little bit more up here. Again, no right or wrong way to put your red in there. While I have my red here, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more down here on the right side of the canvas. I might go up to the base of some of my trees and tap in a little red there, so it looks like I've got leaves falling down to the base. This is where I can also cover up a little bit of those two trunks there. So just a little bit there, covering the base of my trunk. And I'm going to add some more color in there as well. So there's a little bit of my red. Again, kind of proportionate to what I have up here is down there. I'm going to just wash my brush off in case any black got on there. And now I'm going to go ahead and go into my orange. Straight orange. And by tapping this, it's going to give me a lot of different colors in here. I'm going to tap where, hang on a second, I'm going to add the tiniest bit of white into my orange just so I get a little bit of coverage over some of that black. So you can see just a little bit of white in there. Okay. And I can go ahead and now I'm just going to tap. I'm going to tap over some of the red with that orange. So it's going to blend together a little bit. Again, I might constantly wipe off some of that excess red that I get on there. But you really do want this red to look like it's in the background. So I will be covering up a good portion of it. This is where I'm going to fill in a little bit more around the blue as well. So constantly tapping, 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 tapping. I'm not loving this orange that I have, so I might just go ahead and make some as I go. But you can see I'm going over that red. I'm just going to make some orange. So red and some yellow. Again, it's definitely, when you're mixing this, it's going to be much more yellow than it is red. There, it's a much better orange. just going to go ahead and I'm going to tap. And I'm going to tap in. And I like to do this pretty quickly because it allows the colors to blend together and create layers and dimension of color. So I'm always overlapping it as I go. And as I'm just creating leaves, I'm not out here painting every leaf, I'm creating that dimension. I'm going to overlap some of that red again. I'm going over the trunks of the trees. I really am not going to be able to see them, except for down there, and over all those branches that I created as well. I don't see tons of blue, so I'll leave some blue showing, but not a lot. Just want to be able to see through the background, see a little bit of that sky color, but not too much. And again, if your color touches the edge, go ahead and bring it off the edge. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead at the same time. I put some orange down there. I'm going to put some more orange down here as well. In with my red, I'll put a little bit some closer to the trees. In here. I can just tap this so it gets pretty thick. This part down here. A little bit more orange. In here. I'm going to grab the tiniest bit of green while I have this here and just put a little bit of green, some shadow down in the center of my path. Just tapping that in there so it can kind of blend and dry just a bit before I start adding all the yellow down there again to really make it pop. Again, wash your brush off really well because now I've used some green. And now I'm just going to go into some straight yellow. I've got a really nice vibrant golden yellow here, and this is where I just tap again. I'm tapping over the orange, I'm tapping over some of the red, tapping where I've already tapped and tapping where I haven't tapped before. This part can be pretty thick because we want this really, really pretty golden color here. I'm just tapping away. Go. Again, if you're going to the edge, take some color off, make sure you're leaving some blue showing, but still giving a nice bunch of yellow paint in here. We'll add one more bunch of color go, but just tapping. And you can see by the tapping, it also gives me a little bit of texture. So it looks like I have leaves. It also helps me cover up some of those branches that maybe I didn't love. For the most part, I work on a horizontal plane while I'm doing that just because I like to keep that feeling going. It's easier for me to follow where I pounced and where I haven't. Okay, so now I've got some really nice yellow. I still have this brush. I'm going to go in and I'm going to add some bright yellow right along the base of those two light colored trees. And pull a little bit more, fill in with that bright, bright color everywhere where I really haven't touched with the orange and the red. A little bit more of that brightness down there. Again, working horizontally so we keep that idea that this is our walkway, we're walking up through these beautiful leaves. A nice pop of color. I'm going to wash my brush off one more so you can see that I put those pops of color in with that really nice golden yellow with a little bit of white in it, so it gives it just a little bit more depth as we go there, creating those leaves. Everything that's happened up here, of course, happens down below, so we can take a little bit of that white with that yellow in it and just pull some of that color in, maybe right closer to you get to the edge of the path, or is it disappearing? Stay away from the green because it will get a little muddy, but you can just throw in a little bit of that color as well. When you've got that all filled in, we are actually done with our painting, with the exception of signing our name. And sometimes it helps to step back a minute or two from it so you can just see where you might want to add a little bit more yellow, maybe where you think some color needs to come into your tree as you're doing this. If you're done and you're happy with your painting, all you're going to do now is sign your name. You can sign your name down in the lower right hand corner using your paintbrush. You can sign your name on the back. You can do it with a paintbrush there, or use a Sharpie. You can use a Sharpie on the front as well. Just need to wait for the paint to dry. So we're done with this. As we move to November, we are going to be making a holiday wreath that's beautiful greens and eucalyptus and berries that'll be perfect for the front door of your apartment as you go there. I hope to see you all then. Thank you so much for joining me in painting this beautiful fall walk. Everybody have a lovely Halloween.